Hello everybody. This is my 1923 Freed Eisemann NR5 Neutrodyne radio. Now, the 1923 Freed Eisemann Neutrodyne was their very first Neutrodyne radio. What is a Neutrodyne? Well, a Neutrodyne is a fancy TRF radio. What's a TRF? A TRF is a tuned radio frequency. It's not a super heterodyne. It just is a big crystal radio, essentially, where the crystal has been replaced by a vacuum tube, and the RF signal is amplified before the detector, and then the audio is amplified after the detector. So essentially, it's a big crystal radio with RF amplification and AF amplification. So let's take a look inside. Okay, open it up. You can see the Freed Eisemann labels are still there. Really nice. And the broadcast records are untouched, which makes the radio more valuable. The fact that no one has written on any of these sheets. Now let's take a look inside the circuitry. Now, this TRF radio, this Neutodyne radio, has 5 tubes. Okay, so you can see 3 tubes here in the front, and then 2 tubes in the back. Well, these 3 tubes here in the front and the cylinders that you see behind them are each a tank circuit. What's that? Well, that's a radio way. That's a way to coherently tune in a radio station at that RF frequency. The 3 tubes in the front here are amplifying the RF signal, and the 2 tubes in the back here are amplifying the AF signal. So where is the neutralizing capacitors that I talked about? Well, they're here in the back. So what they are is simply bus bar with a glass tube on them, and you slide the bus bar back and forth, and that changes the capacitance, and that neutralizes the capacitance between the plate and the grid of the O1A tubes. All of these tubes are O1As. So I've got this handy little book here that was written by F.F. Webb, and it's copyrighted in 1923, How to Make a Neutrodyne Receiver. And what I like about it is it's got some nice, easy diagrams to see. And I marked a couple of pages here. Let me open it up to the right page. And you can see here in the circuitry that C1 and C2 are these glass rod bus bar capacitors. And what they do is they tap onto the tank circuit coil and they go to the grid. So what in fact you're doing is you're neutralizing the plate and the grid capacitance with these little capacitors. And that allows the amplification to be greater and prevents the receiver from oscillating. Now, this book also is handy in that it has the entire schematic for this radio. It's a 5 tube TRF, as I said, and it has a nice little layout of the entire schematic of the radio. All right, so let's go around to the back, show you how this is powered. Close it up here. And go into the back of the radio. You can see I've got the original diagram here of how to wire the radio so it works. Of course, it's a battery radio. Back in the 20s, that's what most of the radios were. It wasn't until the late 20s that the first radios with built-in power supplies came to be. So here on the bottom, you can see that there are 2 posts here for the the filaments of the tubes. It's 6 volts minus and 6 volts plus. And it's also a post for the minus 22 volts for the detector. And unlike a lot of books that say that the first RF stage should be 45 volts, Freed Eisemann uses 22.5 volts for the first RF stage as well. So if you were wire this with 45 volts, you'd be wiring it wrong. So that's a really good point to know. And if I didn't have this backing here, I might have wired it for 45 volts. So I'm glad the backing is still available. It was still came with this set. And finally, the final RF amplifiers plates, they get 90 volts. And where is this coming from? Well, this company called RB3, this company with this product that's called RB3, makes this great little power supply that has anywhere from minus 6 volts all the way up to plus 135 volts just by taking the wires and tapping in the right taps. So the fact that this 6.5 volt here plus is also the minus 22 for the first RF circuit and the detector, that's accomplished by that jumper cable that you see right there, that blue wire. So it's really handy, and it's very pure power supply, no AC ripple. So let's go around to the front and show you how this is tuned. Well, the way that you tune this radio and is a lot different than a modern radio, that's for sure. First of all, what you need is a set of earphones that has very high impedance. So I'm showing you here a set of earphones that I have that are special, that came from the military. And as you can see, they're 1600 ohms. So if you have 1600 ohms or more, that's good. And that's the way you tune this radio. So you have the plug, you have the plug with the jack. And you go into the first audio stage and plug it in. Excuse my hand. And then you put the earphones on and you tune via first the antenna tuner. So you put that to a number, and usually then the first RF stage would be putting it to a number that's very close to the same. And then the third RF stage, you put it to the number, it won't be exact, but it's the same. And then you fiddle back and forth with the voltage that goes to the detector tube. And then after that, you start to hear a little signal in the earphones. You go to the RF amp tubes filaments. And all this is a rheostat that is increasing or decreasing the voltage that goes to the RF tubes. So the RF filaments. So essentially you're just brightening or dimming the filaments on the RF tubes, and that's your voltage. Okay, so that's how you tune it. So let's fire it up. Take out the plug for the earphones, and I've got already plugged in the plug for the horn. And I've got this nice high impedance horn, and let's turn it on. So we hit the power supply switch. And see if we can get a station. All right, so sorry about that, but now I hope you could hear from the speaker. In fact, I've got a station coming in now, and the way I did that was that I adjusted the filament voltage on the amp tubes. It was a little too low. I brought it up. So you can see here that a little movement on any of these three they track pretty close, but they're not exact. You can see this one here. These first two are on 61, but it's better and louder if I go to 64 on this last RF stage. Then I could make it clearer or more distorted by adjusting the voltage on the detector tube. You can see that that puts a howl into it. So now if I go up a little bit higher voltage, the howl goes away. It gets a little clearer. But if I go too high, it starts to cut out. So sweet spots, you got to find sweet spots. And the same thing with the filament voltage to the RF stages. You find sweet spots, and that's how it's tuned. All right, with the RB3 University Battery Eliminator, they give you this handy-dandy little logbook. And what I've done is that I've filled out the logbook so that I know what settings I can get what station on. And unlike today's radios, the higher numbers are lower frequencies on these dials. The higher the number, the lower the frequency. In other words, you're going down towards about 400, 500 kilohertz on the high numbers. And the low numbers are higher frequency. So as the numbers get lower and lower, the frequency gets higher and higher. So you can see that I've got the station frequency here in this column. And at 1050, you're already down to dial 1 at 13, dial 2 at 10, and dial 3 at 14. And the highest that these old radios can go is about 1100, 1200 kcs or kilohertz. And I've got a station that's somewhere around 1200 here, or 1195, and I don't know what exact frequency is, and I don't know what, but it's a Spanish-speaking station. And you can see that the dial settings here are at 2, 1.5, and 6. So let's tune in one more station before we end this video. So right now, I've got WICC playing, which is a Bridgeport, Connecticut station. And the dial settings, as I showed you, were 61, 61, and 64. So let's go to WFAN sports station. Now to do that, I'm going to go to 50, 48, and 51. See, in one column here, I'm using the earphones with their settings in order to tune in this WFAN sports station. And it has different settings for the detector and for the audio amp. And for the horn, it has different settings once again for the detector, 11, 43, 50, 48, and 51. So let's go to first 50 on the antenna, dial 1, 48 on the first Nutriformer, and 51 on the second Nutriformer, and see if we could hear something. Okay, so 50. 50 and 51. And already we got a nice signal. Let's fine tune it now by going to 11 on the detector. 11, and let's go to 43 on the audio. Oops, sorry about that. Actually, looks like 47, 48 is even better. So I'll probably have to readjust that number from 43 to 47. Or it could have been different. Just to make sure that you know, let me lower the RF power here so that you can hear me a little better. Just to make sure that you understand that this radio requires an outside antenna. And what I've got here in the back is, you can use any kind of wire, but what I'm using is a twin lead 300 ohm wire, which is connected to my dipole outside. I'm a ham radio operator, and I've got one leg here hooked to a 640-foot wire, and that's the antenna terminal that's called outdoor antenna, long wire antenna. And this side of the dipole is 210 feet, and so if I want to use the indoor antenna one post, or short antenna, I could use this wire. So these radios do not work unless there's a good outdoor antenna. And that's how I'm able to get 13 different stations on this old radio. Okay, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you in the next one. The next one, I plan on getting this radio up and running, and the cute little microphone you see on the top, actually you could plug into the detector tube and you could do home broadcasting. But this radio is an NR5 Freed Eisemann. It's very pretty. As you can see, the dials have the numbers on the Bakelite instead of just numbers on the dial. And this guy has 6 tubes instead of 5. And the final stage takes 135 volts. So I'm going to be really excited to get this guy up and running. And just as a final little note there, I'd like you to take a look at this plug. This plug is interesting in that back in the day, back in the 20s, there was a lot of stations that you couldn't hear without using earphones. So the family usually had 3 or 4 sets of earphones. And you plug this into the earphone socket, and you could have 4 different people with 4 different headsets of earphones at the same time listening to the radio. So everybody went around the radio in those days because it was a miracle to hear somebody's voice coming through a box that wasn't near you. So yeah, it's very interesting to have all these antique pieces that are, hopefully we'll get them all up and running. So once again, thank you and have a great day.
Other participating retailers. Learn more at exergen.com.